The marble doesn't lie. That's what Mrs. Luna always said to herself, not out loud, never out loud, but deep in the place where her thoughts lived, quiet and untouched, like a room no one else had a key to. Scrub. Rinse. Ring. 11 p.m. The Kang mansion breathed around her the way it always did, cold and expensive, full of shadows that had learned not to ask questions. Somewhere down the east corridor, she could hear them. The low, clipped voices. The sound of a deal being made over crystal glasses and cigarette smoke. The particular silence that falls over a room when someone has just been told they will not be seeing tomorrow. Mrs. Luna did not flinch. She pressed her cloth to the floor and moved in slow, deliberate circles, the way her mother had taught her to wash rice, the way grief teaches you to breathe. Her knees ached. They had ached for 25 years on this exact floor, and she had learned to be grateful for it. Pain means you're still here, still close. She did not look up when the footsteps came. She never did. The shoes were Italian. She knew them by sound, a sharp, even click that never slowed, never softened, never once acknowledged the woman on her hands and knees who had quietly kept his world from unraveling. Kang Min-joon moved through his own mansion the way a winter wind moves through a house, present, cutting, and utterly indifferent to the damage it leaves behind. He passed her without a word. He always did. Good, she thought, wringing the cloth again. That's exactly how it should be. To everyone in the Kang household, Mrs. Luna was a fixture, like the grandfather clock in the foyer or the oil painting of a stern ancestor in the dining room. She had been there so long that the younger staff assumed she had simply always existed here, grey-bunned and aproned, scrubbing the evidence of powerful men's sins from a floor that had seen more blood than it had ever seen sunlight. They did not know her first name. They did not know her story. And Mrs. Luna, who had spent 25 years perfecting the art of being invisible, intended to keep it that way. Because invisibility, she had learned, was not weakness. It was the most dangerous thing a woman could choose to be. She had watched Min-joon grow from a boy with his father's jawline and his father's stubbornness into a man with his father's empire and, God help her, his father's hollow eyes. She had cleaned the floors after his first violent lesson in loyalty. She had polished the glass on the night he was crowned the devil of soul. She had knelt, always knelt, and said nothing, carried nothing on her face, let the mansion swallow her whole. All to stay close. All for him. But tonight, something in the air felt different. The voices down the corridor had gone quiet in the wrong way, not the quiet of a deal concluded, but the quiet of something breaking. Mrs. Luna stilled her cloth. Her eyes, dark and steady as river stones, moved toward the east wing. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet. She had waited 25 years. She could wait another 5 minutes. But the chandelier in the main hall had other plans. The first shot shattered it at 11:47 p.m., and the sound of it, that violent, crystalline explosion raining down on Italian marble, was the sound of 25 years of silence finally, irreversibly, coming to an end. The elastic bandage went on left knee first. Always left. That was the rule, the small, private ritual that had carried Mrs. Luna through 9,000 mornings in this house without breaking. She sat on the edge of her narrow cot in the staff quarters, winding the beige wrap around the joint with the practiced ease of a woman who had long ago made peace with the fact that her body was keeping score even when she refused to. 25 years. She let the number sit in her chest for just a moment before tucking it away, the way you tuck a photograph back into an envelope that you've already memorized. By 10:45 p.m., she was in the main corridor, bucket in hand, cloth already dampened with a lemon and bleach solution that had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. The Kang estate in Northern Virginia was a different kind of beautiful than most people imagined when they heard the word mansion. It wasn't the warm, grand kind, not the kind that welcomed you. It was beautiful the way a museum is beautiful, untouchable, curated, and deeply indifferent to your presence. She liked it that way. She had lowered herself to her knees and begun the first slow circles when she heard the elevator at the far end of the hall release its soft chime. She did not look up. She had trained herself out of the habit years ago. Looking up was an invitation, and invitations led to visibility, and visibility was the one luxury she could never afford. The footsteps came anyway. Even, measured, unhurried. The footsteps of a man who had never once in his adult life doubted that the world would rearrange itself to accommodate him. Kang Min-joon passed within 4 feet of her without breaking stride. He was on the phone, his voice low and clipped, switching between Korean and English the way men like him switched between weapons, choosing whatever was most efficient for the moment. Something about a shipment. Something about a name that needed to be removed from a list. His black suit caught the light of the chandelier as he moved, and Mrs. Luna pressed her cloth to the marble and worked her circles and felt the familiar ache move from her knees up into the place behind her sternum where she kept everything she was not allowed to say. He didn't look down. He never did. Good, she thought. And meant it. She had not always been invisible. There was a time, a particular, golden, reckless time, when Mrs. Luna had been the most visible woman in any room she entered. Her name, then, was just Luna. Luna Adiz Obi, 22 years old, freshly arrived in Seoul on a graduate fellowship that was really just an excuse to see the world before it closed around her. She had grown up in Baltimore, her mother's house on Greenmount Avenue, sweet potato pie cooling on the sill every Sunday, and she had carried Baltimore with her into the sharp Korean winter of 1981 like a coat that didn't quite fit the weather but was too beloved to leave behind. She had met Kang Joon-ho at a record shop on a Thursday. He was holding a Marvin Gaye album, looking at it with the concentration of a man trying to solve something, and she had laughed before she could stop herself because the expression on his face was so wonderfully, unexpectedly lost. "You look like you've never seen a Motown record before," she said, in English, because it was all she had. He had looked up. His eyes were sharp, searching, nothing like the hollow expression his son would inherit. "I haven't," he said. His English was careful, accented, sincere. "A friend told me this was the sound of longing. I wanted to know what that sounds like." They listened to the whole album that evening in his tiny Mapo apartment, sitting on opposite ends of a blanket on the floor with instant noodles going cold between them, and by the time Marvin got to the last track, the space between them had quietly, irrevocably closed. Joon-ho was different then. She would spend years trying to describe it to herself with the precision it deserved. He was different, which is to say he was still soft in the places that a man must eventually decide whether to protect or abandon. He laughed easily. He asked questions and then actually listened. He told her about his father's world the way you describe a country you fled, with detail, with grief, and with the desperate hope that the distance is permanent. They had 8 months. 8 months of Motown records and street food and a love that grew with the particular urgency of 2 people who understand, somewhere beneath the joy, that the clock is already running. The men came on a Tuesday in October, when the leaves outside the apartment window had just begun to turn. There were 3 of them, quiet men in good coats, the kind of men whose politeness is more frightening than any threat. They did not raise their voices. They did not need to. They simply told Joon-ho that his father was unwell and that the family required him at home, and the word required carried inside it every consequence that the sentence politely declined to specify. Luna stood in the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel and watched Joon-ho's face close like a door. She had never seen it happen so completely or so fast. One moment he was the man from the record shop, searching, present, hers, and the next he was someone she was only beginning to understand she had never fully known. He turned to her. His eyes said everything that his mouth, in the presence of those 3 men, was not permitted to say. "I'll call," he told her. He did not call. What came instead, 3 weeks later, was a woman. Middle-aged, impeccably dressed, with a kind of face that has been arranged into neutrality for so long it has forgotten how to do anything else. She sat across from Luna in a coffee shop near the university and placed an envelope on the table between them. "Mr. Kang thanks you for your time," the woman said. "This is sufficient for relocation and for any related expenses." Luna was 4 months pregnant. She pushed the envelope back across the table. The woman pushed it forward again. "This is not a negotiation," she said softly. "This is a courtesy. The next conversation will not be a courtesy." Luna took the envelope. She bought a plane ticket to Baltimore. She moved back into her mother's house on Greenmount Avenue. She had a boy, healthy, furious, loud, and she named him nothing for 3 days while she lay in the hospital bed and made the only decision that has ever truly cost her everything. She did not register his birth under the Kang name. She did not fight. She made a different plan, slower, quieter, more dangerous than anything those men in good coats could have anticipated. Because Luna Adiz Obi had grown up in Baltimore, And Baltimore teaches you that survival is not always loud. Sometimes it is patient. Sometimes it looks exactly like defeat. She left her son with her mother when he was 18 months old. She told her mother she was going back to finish her research. Her mother, who had raised Luna alone and therefore understood the particular grammar of necessary lies, held the boy on her hip and said, "Come back to us." "I will," Luna said. And she did, but not before learning every room of the Kang estate, every shift rotation, every rule of a world that depended on its servants being invisible. She had presented herself at the staff agency in Seoul with references she had spent 2 careful years assembling, and she had been placed in the Kang household without ceremony, without suspicion, and without anyone once connecting the quiet middle-aged cleaner to the young American woman Junho had briefly and foolishly loved a decade prior. She learned the first rule quickly: never make eye contact with the family. The second rule she taught herself: never react to anything you hear. The third rule, the one that cost her the most, was the one she wrote on a piece of paper and burned in the staff bathroom on her first anniversary in the house: he must never know you. Min-joon had been 12 when she arrived. A serious, watchful boy with his father's jaw and her own eyes. She had not been prepared for that. For 3 days she could barely function. She would see him cross a room and her hands would forget what they were doing. But she held herself together the way you hold a wound together when you're not yet somewhere safe. With pressure, with stillness, with the absolute refusal to let go. She watched him grow. She cleaned around the edges of his life, polished the floors he crossed, washed the windows he looked through, removed the evidence of the violence that slowly, relentlessly reshaped him from the watchful boy into the hollow man. She was there for all of it. She saw the precise moment, he was 19, when his eyes went flat, and she recognized it for what it was. The moment he stopped asking the world to be gentle and started deciding to be harder than it. She wanted to stop him. She pressed her cloth to the floor instead. Not yet, she always told herself. Not yet. The time must be right. 25 years. The time had never been right. Until the chandelier came down. She heard the argument before she heard the gunshot. Voices cresting in the east wing, breaking through the mansion's careful silence with a rawness that told her immediately this was not the orchestrated tension of business. This was something personal. Something panicked. She was already rising from her knees when the first shot cracked through the main hall and the chandelier. 200 pounds of hand-blown Venetian glass exploded from the ceiling in a cascade of light and violence that shook the floor beneath her feet. She did not run. She moved, quickly, purposefully, bucket still in hand, toward the sound. What she found at the entrance of the main hall stopped her for exactly 1 second. Min-joon was backed against the far wall, his phone shattered on the floor beside him, his jacket torn at the shoulder. 3 men stood between her and him. She recognized one, Seo, head of internal security, a man she had watched eat breakfast in this house for 6 years, a man who had never once looked at her. The other 2 she didn't know, but she understood their posture. They had already decided how the night would end. Min-joon's eyes found her across the wreckage of the chandelier. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, which was to say, almost not at all. A flicker of recognition. The cleaner. Seo raised his weapon. Seo-sai. Her voice came out in Korean, low, unhurried, and carrying inside it something that had no business being in the voice of a cleaning woman. It was a register she had not used in 25 years, and it surfaced now like something that had only been waiting, patient and undisturbed, at the bottom of a very deep place. Seo turned. She was already moving, closing the distance in the 3 seconds his surprise brought her, and she raised the bottle of industrial solvent she'd been carrying in the bucket. Heavy, pressurized, with a spray nozzle that, at close range, would blind a man before he could blink, and leveled it at his face. "I said his name," she said, still in Korean. "Kang Joon-ho. Say it back to me and tell me if you think he would sanction what you're doing in his son's house tonight." The name worked the way she knew it would. Joon-ho had been dead for 11 years, but the dead, in families like this one, carry more authority than the living. The 2 men behind Seo exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. Seo's weapon arm wavered, not much, barely perceptibly, but Luna had spent 25 years reading the small movements of men who thought they were being observed by no one. "Who are you?" Seo said. "I'm the woman who has been cleaning this floor since before you were trusted with a gun," she said. "And I know where the bodies are buried, Literally, because I mopped around them. So you are going to lower that weapon, and you are going to sit down on the floor of this hallway, and you are going to wait while I decide whether Mr. Kang's son should hear the story of who has been feeding his rivals information about the shipment schedule. The weapon came down. The two men behind Seo took a careful step backward. Luna did not release the bottle. She heard Min-joon push off from the wall behind her. She heard his breathing, ragged, disbelieving. She did not turn around. Not yet. There was still glass on the floor and Seo's hands were still too visible, and she had not kept this boy alive for 25 years to lose him in the last chapter. "Call your men," she said to Min-joon, without turning. "The ones you actually trust. I'll need about 4 minutes." A beat of silence. "You have 4 minutes," Min-joon said. And his voice, for the first time in 25 years, sounded like a question. They sat in the kitchen afterward, the only room in the mansion that had ever felt, to Luna, like it belonged to ordinary people. Min-joon's jacket was off. His hands were around a cup of tea she'd made without asking, because she'd been making tea in this kitchen for 25 years and she knew where everything was. He watched her the way you watch something you can't yet categorize. She reached into the front pocket of her apron. Her hands were steady. She'd made sure of that, had taken 3 deep, private breaths before sitting down, had folded her feelings back into their envelope the way she'd done 10,000 times before. But this time she did not seal it. This time she slid what she'd been carrying across the table toward him. A Polaroid photograph. Old enough that the edges had gone soft, the colors shifted toward sepia. But the image was clear. A woman, young, with a full laugh and tired eyes, sitting in a hospital chair. And in her arms, swaddled and furious and magnificently new, a baby with a very specific jawline. Min-joon looked at the photograph for a long time. "That baby," Luna said quietly, "was born in Baltimore in January of 1982. His mother named him after no one, because she was afraid that naming him would make her feel entitled to keep him. And then she made the hardest decision of her life, and she kept a different kind of promise instead, a promise to stay close. To stay safe. To make sure he never knew." She paused. "She was wrong. I know that now." Min-joon looked up. His eyes, and she saw it clearly for the first time, saw it without the distance and the discipline she'd maintained for so long, were her eyes. Darker, yes, framed by his father's severity. But hers, undeniably, irreversibly hers. "The woman in that photo," he said. Not a question. A man reading a map and finally, terribly, knowing where he is. "Was 23 years old," she said. "And very, very in love with a man who was not as free as he believed himself to be." The kitchen was quiet for a long time. Then the Devil of Soul set down his tea, pressed both palms flat to the table, and lowered his head, not in collapse, but in the posture of a man who is restructuring everything he thought he understood about the architecture of his own life. "Your knees," he said, finally, his voice strange and fractured. "You've been on that floor for 25 years. Yes. For me. Yes." He did not speak again for almost a minute. When he did, his voice was different, scraped down to something younger, something that hadn't yet learned to be hollow. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," she said. "And I was wrong. And I'm sorry." She met his eyes. "But I am here now, Min-joon. I have always been here." She made him wait until morning to make the call. He needed the hours. She could see it, could read his face the way she'd been reading it for 25 years through stolen glances and careful periphery. He needed time to let the restructuring happen without an audience. He sat at the kitchen table for most of the night, and she stayed nearby, not pressing, not consoling, just present, the way she should have been allowed to be from the beginning. At 7 a.m., she placed her phone on the table between them. "There is something else," she said. He looked at her. "You have a sister." He was still for a very long time. "Her name is Patricia. She's 41. She teaches 4th grade in Baltimore. She looks like your father around the eyes, and she makes the same face you're making right now when she's trying not to show that something has affected her." Luna pushed the phone closer. "I told her about you 3 years ago. I hope you can forgive me for making her wait this long too." Min-joon stared at the phone. She knows. His voice was rough. She's known for 3 years. She agreed to wait for you to be ready. Luna paused. I told her you'd get there. His jaw worked. He picked up the phone. Found the contact, Patricia, Baltimore, and Luna watched something move across his face that she had not seen there in 20 years. Vulnerability. Plain, undefended, terrifying vulnerability. He pressed call. She put it on speaker without being asked. Some old instinct, some deep knowledge that he needed to hear this voice fill a room rather than whisper it privately, needed to let it be real in the way that only shared sound can make things real. 3 rings. Hello. A woman's voice, warm, careful, containing its own tremendous effort at steadiness. Min-joon's throat moved. Patricia. A sound on the other end that was not quite a word. Then, oh. Okay. Okay, hi. A breath. A laugh that was also almost something else entirely. Mama said you'd sound serious. She was right. And Min-joon, the devil of soul, the man who had ordered things done in dark rooms that this kitchen would never know, made a sound that was completely beyond his control. Something between a laugh and a man remembering how to breathe. Luna pressed her hand over her mouth. She would not cry. She had 25 years of practice. But her eyes, for the first time in a very long time, did not cooperate. Min-joon, Patricia said. Tell me something true. First thing you can think of. A pause. Then, quietly, I don't know how to do any of this. Perfect, Patricia said. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. A beat. Also, Mama's sweet potato pie is not optional. Just so you know. He found the mole by Tuesday. It was Seo, as Luna had known it was, Seo, who had been supplementing his income for 14 months by selling shipment windows to a rival operation out of Philadelphia, and who had finally decided that a living employer was less valuable than a dead one who couldn't testify to the arrangement. Min-joon's remaining men brought Seo to the estate's private office and stood him in front of the desk and waited for the instruction that had, in this room, in every other instance, meant only one thing. Luna was not in the room. She was in the hallway. She heard the silence that stretched out after Seo's explanation, the silence in which Min-joon was deciding, and she knew that particular silence because she had catalogued every silence in this house for 25 years, and this one was new. This one had a different shape than the ones that had come before it. Give him to the Philadelphia office, Min-joon said finally. Anonymously. Let them sort out what to do with a man who burned them from both sides. A pause. Then get him out of my house. She heard one of his men hesitate. Boss. He'll spend the rest of his life being useful to people who don't trust him, Min-joon said. That's worse. Get him out. Luna moved down the hallway before the door opened. She returned to the kitchen, sat down, and wrapped her hands around a mug that had gone cold. He appeared in the kitchen doorway 20 minutes later, jacket off, looking like a man who had just set down something extraordinarily heavy. I'm going to step back, he said. From all of it. Transition it. It'll take time. This isn't a thing you walk away from in a week. But I'm going to do it. He looked at her. I need you to tell me it's possible. I raised you from a distance for 25 years, she said. I think possible is a relative term. Something almost like a smile crossed his face. Almost. Patricia invited us for dinner, he said. I know. I talked to her this morning. He looked at her for a long moment. You talked to her this morning. She wanted to know your food allergies. I don't. I told her none. I also told her you have no idea what to do with your hands in a room full of people who are happy. He was quiet. Then, that's accurate. I know, Luna said. I've been watching you for 25 years. She stood, and for the very first time, she did not move toward the bucket or the cloth or the apron. She moved toward him. She stopped when she was close enough to see the faint scar above his left eyebrow that he'd gotten at 13 falling from a courtyard wall, a scar she had cleaned blood from the floor beneath without once being able to reach for him. She reached for him now. Her hand, work-worn and steady, found the side of his face. He did not pull back. He closed his eyes. The row house on Greenmount Avenue smelled like butter and cinnamon and something deeper, the particular warmth of a house that has been loved in for decades, that has absorbed joy and grief and Sunday mornings in equal measure until they become structural, load-bearing parts of the walls. Min-joon stood on the front steps for a long moment before he knocked. Luna stood beside him. Her coat was green, a color he'd never seen her wear. It suited her in a way that made him understand, newly, that he'd only ever known one version of her, and that the rest of her was waiting for him like an entire country he hadn't known he had citizenship in. Patricia opened the door. She was tall. She had their father's eyes and Luna's stubborn jawline and a smile that operated completely without her permission. It simply appeared, wide and unguarded, the moment she saw them on the step. She looked at Min-joon for 3 seconds. "You've got Mama's nose," she said. "I called it. Come in, the pie's been ready for an hour." The house was full. Patricia's husband Raymond, 2 children who had already decided Min-joon was interesting in the way that adults who don't know how to be around children are interesting. Luna's sister, Aunt Bernice, who shook Min-joon's hand with both of hers and said, "Lord, you are tall." Junho was tall. "Luna, he has his father's." "Bernice," Luna said warmly. "I'm just saying." The table was too small for everyone, so they ate in shifts that became not shifts because no one actually went anywhere. Raymond played jazz from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner, something warm and unhurried that filled the spaces in conversation without demanding anything. The children climbed on furniture. Bernice told a story about Luna at 19 that made Min-joon set down his fork and look at his mother with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and delight. The sweet potato pie arrived at 9 p.m. Patricia cut it with ceremony. Min-joon accepted his slice with both hands, the way his mother had been teaching him, in small unconscious gestures over the past week, that some things are received and not just taken. He took a bite. He looked up. "Well," Patricia said. "I don't have words," he said. Raymond pointed at him. "That is the correct answer." And Min-joon laughed. Not the short, controlled sound that occasionally escaped him in meetings. A real laugh, surprised out of him by pie and jazz and a sister he'd only just met who was already completely unimpressed by everything the world had built up around him. It moved through him like something thawing, like the particular relief of a cold thing becoming warm. Luna, from across the table, watched her son laugh in a house full of family. She did not press her hands to her mouth this time. She let herself cry, quietly, and no one made a thing of it, because they were her people and they understood that some tears are not grief, some tears are just 25 years of love finally finding the room it was always meant to fill. Later, when the children were asleep and Raymond was washing dishes and Bernice had claimed the good armchair, Patricia showed Min-joon the photo wall in the hallway, Luna's whole life, assembled in frames. His mother at 22, laughing in a Seoul street. His mother at 30, holding a baby girl. His mother at every age he had never been allowed to know her. And at the very end of the wall, in a new frame that still had the sticker on the back, the Polaroid. The one from the hospital. A young woman and a furious, newborn boy. "She never took it down," Patricia said quietly. "Even when she was in Korea. She sent me a copy. I've had it my whole life." She glanced at him. "You were a very ugly baby." "I've improved," he said. She snorted. "Marginally." Raymond appeared from the kitchen holding a phone. "Somebody take a picture before he goes back to being scary." "I'm not," Min-joon began. "You're a little scary," Patricia said pleasantly. Luna stood and walked to her son's side. She put her arm through his. He looked down at her, still uncertain, still learning the grammar of this, still somewhere between the man he'd been and the one he was choosing to become, and she looked up at him with the expression she'd been holding in reserve for 25 years. Pure, uncomplicated, stubborn, bottomless love. Raymond took the photo. And the devil of soul stood in a Baltimore row house with sweet potato pie still on his jacket and his mother's arm in his and his sister's laugh ringing off the walls, and he looked exactly like what he was becoming. A man who had traded an empire for something worth considerably more. 25 years. One photograph. One family finally whole. If this story was worth your time, make it worth mine. Like, subscribe, and share this with somebody who needs to believe that it's never too late for the truth to find its way home. Next video is coming, and trust me, You'll want a seat for that one. See you soon. Black Heart.